Holden Advisors is excited to share this new interview series featuring revenue enablement leaders. The series is by enablement for enablement. For this series, highly skilled enablement leaders from around the world will share best practices, lessons learned, and tips that will be helpful not only for enablement, but also for sales leaders who want a second voice. To participate in the series, you can reach out to Erica Summers through LinkedIn or through the Sales Enablement Society. Thanks for joining us again for the Sales Enablement interview series. I'm excited today to have Carla Price with us. Carla is the founder and leader of the Providence Women in Sales Enablement Organization. Welcome, Carla.
Thank you, Erica. Excited for today.
Likewise, I'm so glad to have someone with your experience to be able to participate in the series and share some lessons learned. So tell us a little bit about your background in sales enablement, Carla.
Yeah, absolutely. My background in sales enablement, I'd say, is two parts, because one is more informal and the other is more formal, because I'd been doing sales enablement in various roles really for years, but it wasn't called that at the time, or maybe there were some people calling it that, but it wasn't really as widely recognized, and especially in out of the SaaS industry. So it wasn't until the last 4 or 5 years when I started to hear the term, hear what it was, and then started to work more formally with those titles in enablement. And so just as some examples, when I did it more informally, I was in roles that actually sales enablement, revenue enablement supports, which I think gave me a good background and firsthand experience so that I can be good at the job. So, while I was in customer success roles or account management on sales teams, doing the role and also realizing that there was a gap, and that was sales enablement, whether it was called that or not. And it was, we're missing some of these processes that are repeatable. We're missing tools that are going to make our jobs easier and we can be more efficient and effective and productive. So I did some, I guess I would call them side projects at the time, or just partnering with other teams, just where I saw it was needed, so that those things could start to get done and we could be better at our jobs. And then it wasn't, like I said, until more recently when I started working in sales enablement in the industry, which is just such a wonderful community in and of itself, really supportive, talented people in sales enablement. And, like I started to say before, it's not as common that companies have it. Some companies have never even heard of it. I think it's just very, like I said, niche. Like you see it more in SaaS at times. And a lot of the times those teams are super small. Like at startups, it's a one-person team. So being able to lead a team that was one person and then to two, and formalizing what that was, having a structure, creating a charter, that's when I got to really flourish and lean into the career.
That's such great perspective, Carla, because having been in roles that receive sales enablement, it gives you such great perspective about what works and what doesn't, what you might want to see. So tell us, when you transitioned into sales enablement, what's been one of your biggest lessons learned?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that I inherently knew, especially from being in the role, but also had to learn it with others, because when people are in sales enablement, you want to be able to enable, you want to be able to support others in their roles. So there's a lesson that everyone has to learn, whether it's an individual or a team, and it's making sure that everyone is aligned and understands what you're doing and is bought in. Like the stakeholders, yes, those decision makers, higher level, leaders who are involved, that is key. But at the end of the day, that's all kind of a waste of time unless you really also have that buy-in from the people who you are affecting, your audience, really your internal audience, your, because at the end of the day, I think in sales enablement, we are salespeople internally to our revenue teams or sales teams. So selling it to them. So I think it's really important that enablers are working very closely with managers and they're able to work closely with their teams. But there are opportunities, I believe, whether it's directly through enablement or through sales leaders, that we can make sure that the people who are directly affected by what we're doing and we're trying to have a positive impact on, hence to drive revenue at the end of the day, that we're giving them what they need and they like and they want and what's actually going to help them. Again, I think it's a waste of time otherwise. So that lesson, like I said, it's something like I inherently knew because I was on that side of it before, but it's a lesson that like I had to make sure that everyone else could understand too, and push for it and, not really back down on that. So that's part of like a personal lesson too, to kind of stick with it. And it's all, again, like how you have relationships with people internally, how you're able to present something and sell it to them internally, and make sure it's what they need. So it's not easy. And I think it's just like a continuous process, but being able to, find that common ground and make sure that we're all working towards that same goal.
It's been a common theme, Carla, that I've been hearing in the interview series about making sure that you're aligned up and down and across sales, but that you're really focused on what's most important to those salespeople. And I would say frontline sales managers, because at the end of the day, they're such a big leverage point for this. And, if you're coming into enablement, it's so critical to really understand that alignment piece. So tell me, Carla, what do you wish someone would have told you when you got started in enablement?
Yes. It's a common kind of, it's a cliche word, phrase, but the boil the ocean phrase, don't try to boil the ocean. So, and that has happened like in many instances across the org and companies I've worked at, especially on the strategic side, strategic operations, even in sales. Like it's just, you want to try, and it's human and it's like natural. Like we do that in our personal lives. Like we want to try to do it all and get it done. And that's great. But I think when it comes to enablement, it's another great example of we can't do it all, and nor should we do it all, because we need to focus on what is really going to move the needle. And so that includes like so many different pieces of it. Like if we're going to do an enablement program, is it going to be for everybody, every rep, and just trying to, appeal in that way? Is that going to really be effective? Or are we going to focus on, these B player reps who have these accounts that we can get over the mark and make sure that they're, hitting those numbers that we need to hit in order to reach our goals as a company? So being smart about that, and not trying to do too much. Like you have programs throughout the year that you plan for by quarter, you're mapping it out. It's like, we don't need to do, we shouldn't do these 6 things really. Like it's spreading ourselves too thin. They're all things that need to be done, but let's just more narrowly focus and put ourselves into that, like put all of our weight into it on 1 or 2 things and do them really well versus, do a C+ job or a B- job on all of them. Let's do 1 or 2 things and let's do an A+ job if we can, not perfectionists, but we are.
Carla, if you could stand on the top of the mountain and yell that, I think what I have seen in almost every organization is even if sales enablement can crank out all of the things, your sales teams or your customer success teams or whoever you're enabling does not have the capacity to absorb that much change. And so you're just flooding your field. And, it's, I think, one of the biggest challenges, because in sales enablement, you sit in the middle of sales and marketing and product marketing, customer success. And so you become this point of intake for all of these changes that you want to make. However, you also have to sort of be a gatekeeper to keep sales time safe. What's your take on that?
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I thought of 2 things when you said that. One is change management. Like sales enablement is change management in so many ways. And the more I've educated myself on that, like the more I've been able to understand how to do what we need to do effectively. I hadn't really known much about even, again, the phrase of change management, especially like being on the sales and account team side with working with customers. Like that is imperative. There's so many like little pieces and thoughtful, intentional things that you need to think of and you need to do to make sure that even small changes are executed in a way that is going to accomplish your end result. I mean, that goes again for anything, whether it's your family with kids or whether you're a teacher with students, it's the same. It's human behavior and it's groups of people. Again, that is dynamic. That is not easy. It's not easy with one person. So the groups make it more dynamic. And then, so change management. And then the other thing I was thinking of with sales enablement in that middle ground between teams, it's like, you can't be this food server, just like writing it down, going in the kitchen and getting it like very reactively. It has to be strategic, thought out, proactive, but also have the flexibility. Because again, if we go back to the alignment and who is this for, who is our audience, who do we want to help so we can drive revenue, it is the sales team and the revenue team. So it's finding that very difficult balance or balance. Yeah, that balance. There's a word I can't get, but that balance of what's coming in, what is needed, what we have proactively wanted to accomplish, the company goals, all of it. So I think in doing so, you need to always be pausing and taking a step back and assessing like throughout the process. Say throughout a quarter as there's things coming in and then you're rolling out programs, like be thoughtful about it without rushing. I think sales enable, or just the sales world in general, like it's very fast and you have to be. Sales enablement, so you're trying to keep up. We're all trying to make sure we're cranking it out. You have startups like, tech right now, like we want to make sure we're doing the best we can. So it's important to be quick, be agile. I think it's also important to stop, because if you put that time in to invest, it'll be worth it than this like fast acting machine that's just being robotic and then it's not thought out. It's something I'll say, but I forgot. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think we could probably have an entire interview series just on what you were just talking about. And so as we evolve some of these, we will drill down into some of these topics, but I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. So coming from SaaS and being in, having a lot of different experience and different perspectives and different roles, what is the best sales kickoff experience that you've had personally?
Yes. And this is an interesting question because I've been at 3 different companies and they've all done this very differently, and some not at all, or some under a different name, not sales kickoff. So I'd say, like, to answer this, I'd have to like pull from different experiences, because years ago in the past, it was a kind of a sales kickoff. I guess it was a little bit larger in scope. One of the things I really loved about that was they brought in a phenomenal, inspirational speaker. And I'm not saying you need a speaker for every SKO, because I also don't think there's many phenomenal speakers. Like, it's just the way it is. I'm not saying, not trying to hate on anyone. I'm just saying it's hard. That's really hard to come in from the outside and really be able to resonate with a group of people you don't know, trying to be on message and what the theme is, and making sure that it's all connecting and going to be part of accomplishing the goals of the SKO. So I think that's a really difficult piece, but if you can do it well, that was one of the times that I'm speaking of, having that inspirational speaker come in, like that, like changed me, and like it just made me really excited. So it's not easy, but if that can be done, yes. The other part from a different one, which wasn't called SKO, but they were broken down into groups where sales could have their kickoff for the year. And I felt this way in sales enablement, and I heard the feedback from people who were in sales at that company. It was very much those interactive, like group sessions that they could have together. because not that you don't want to be lectured, because like I said, if you have an inspirational speaker, if you have someone doing a really good job, it's good, and that's hard. So no one wants to do that all day, but I think the more you can have a chance for people to talk together who don't typically have that, and not just like in this more remote world, but I mean, that's a big part of it, right? Because we have people, in this example, there were people working on the West Coast and the East Coast, and they're sales reps, and they're on the same team. They're just in regional groups, and there's not a lot of overlap in the or consistency in what they're doing. And so you have these like really great best practices being used in the West Coast, but the East Coast has no idea. And so they get to meet in person, and they're like, wow, I'd love to do that. Can I learn about that? And just like that was a great learning in that particular session, and what I'm talking about now, where they can share that we can bring all those things together in sales enablement, unify them, and be like, okay, take it or leave it. Like, we're not going to force these certain things, but here are some things that are working for these people and these people if you'd like to try. So I'd say that in an SKO has been really effective. And again, going back to something I started to talk about, and I think you honed in on really well, that I can go off for a while on about, is just that being inundated with information and content and nonstop. And when you think about learning, when it's this environment, or again, a kid or a student, an adult, anyone in any situation, like, we can't take for granted the process of learning that takes place when there's no content, right? Like that break, that silence, that's when your brain can actually do its thing, process the material. You can think. We can't skip over that, because that's not how brains work. Like, you're going from one session to another. So I think that's another good learning. When I've seen, I don't know if I've actually seen that be done well, but I think the times I've seen it kind of go in the wrong direction is something I've learned from. And I think that I'd want to make sure that in an SKO, that if we can be intentional about spacing out what we're putting out there to people, giving them time to have a break and talk to people. Like, that's how people learn, like talking to others. So if you can have a session that's really good, right? Again, back to what I said before, instead of doing 6 programs, do 2 A+. So do those really great sessions, interactive or a really good speaker, whatever it is. Then you have a break. So then people can talk about it with their peers. Like, we're missing that important piece. So I think those, I guess, are 3 maybe learnings from what I've seen work well in SKOs. And with all of that, I'd say, as an overarching umbrella, being really clear about the theme and the goals. Like, what are the company's goals and objectives? What are we trying to achieve? And again, not 6 things, not slides that are all over the place. No one can walk. Like, you want just keep it simple. You want to walk out and be able to say, hey, Carla, Erica, Joe, you guys, tell me what we're doing this year. And you should easily be able to say it. And it's just simple. Just keep it simple.
I love that. There were so many good nuggets in what you just said. And one that I really honed in on was about the connectivity between teams that don't normally get to talk to each other. And one thing that I've always encouraged clients to do is, even when you are role playing or sharing best practices or doing pipeline reviews, whatever it is, mix it up every once in a while, because your team sort of gets groupthink and you don't have any fresh ideas. So if you mix it up with other teams, you're getting their best practices, their lessons learned, and it invigorates people to get to meet others across the organization. So I absolutely love that you brought that to light, Carla. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think folks will learn a lot from you, people who are getting into leadership, getting started in sales enablement. But one last question for you. What are you focused on for personal growth in 2023?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, wow. We're over halfway through 2023 now. So I think I've shifted a bit, because I've definitely been affected by the unfortunate changes in tech with layoffs. And it's been really a roller coaster for me, and very different from what I've experienced in the 6 years prior when I was at the same company. So I think what I've been I wouldn't say 2023, I'm going to say from here on out for the rest of the year, because that has changed me, that for the rest of the year, being open and flexible to opportunities that I wouldn't, instead of pigeonholing myself and seeing myself as one thing. You know, we tell ourselves these stories and these narratives about ourselves that really we start from a young age, not to get too deep on this, but it's been a big part of my personal development lately, which relates to my career. You have this story of who you are and what you can achieve, what your potential is, what you can do. You start to get this idea of how others perceive you. And some of that is based on what people thought of me in middle school. Like, it's silly, but it's true. Like that, those things stay stuck in your head, and they're these stories. They're not, you don't have to judge them. They're like, you know, they're not necessarily positive or negative. Sometimes they are from our own lens. But for me, I think the more that I can detach myself from some of those beliefs and who I am and what I can do, and really just like be very open to anything and know that, you know, there's many possibilities, that has been helping me to enjoy myself more and do more of what I love. You know, I think just in this conversation and in other conversations I have with people, like it organically comes out of what's important to me. So I think being able to focus on those things, I can achieve what I want to achieve, which is having an impact. Like at the end of the day, that is always what I've been about. And people have helped to articulate that for me. Someone maybe 6 months to a year ago, I had a really like heart to heart with someone and as a mentor, and we talked through it, and he said, oh, so you like to have an impact. That's what's important to you. It was like, oh yeah, like, you know, it was nice to have someone put the words to it. So for me, having an impact, like we talked about, on people, on, you know, what they're able to, their success, not just like, oh, I want you to succeed, I'll be here in the background. Like it's not necessarily that. It's more like, let's all do this together. Like it's hard to watch something be done when you know, there's a better way. So people and teams, we talked about teams and organizations, like a sales org, the bigger business, like having an impact and use the phrase before, but moving the needle in various ways. That's what I want to continue to focus on, and you know, make sure I'm noticing when I'm doing that. That's another thing that because we talked about my personal goals and what I want to do, and that's back to stopping and reflecting and realizing, wow, like I did this thing. Because I think if you don't stop and realize what you've impacted and what you've done, you're not able to repeat it as well and as like confidently. So doing that helps you to move forward and continue it. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I think it's a good place for me to be, and I'm excited for, you know, being part of a team in that sense. I'm excited for what I've been able to bring to the WISE community, Women in Sales Enablement, as you mentioned earlier. Wonderful group of women in the Providence chapter, and we often partner with the Boston chapter. We do a lot of virtually just because it's been easier at times, but a couple of in person with the smaller group in Providence, and doing that has been really important to me. So I think bringing that impact, helping others to learn and grow is something I can do with WISE, and then also, you know, in my next role.
I love the self-reflection, Carla. It's so important for us to do and continue to grow. So thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing that, and just really appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights. Thank you again. And absolutely. We will talk to you soon. Thank you so much.